Dr. Huey, thank you for taking up your time to share your research and what you found regarding the COVID-19 virus and our flagship product, 7 patented product, Protandim.
Thank you very much for the kind words, Daniel. I'm happy to be here. Uh, the main part of that talk was regarding oxidative stress, and with COVID, it's never been more in the news than now. It's the oxidative stress from COVID that is causing all the problems with the breathing, with the lung function, and ultimately with the mortality rate. So we're going to talk about this specifically, and we'll go to the slideshow here. And let's go up here. So COVID, NRF2, and U. I've been involved with LifeVantage for about 9 years now, and I must say I'm extremely pleased that I have been. I'm extraordinarily happy that I've came across this product years ago, and it was shown to me, I should say, years ago, and I've been using it with my patients for many, many years prior to COVID. Because as you'll see, the ability to increase the protein, what's called NRF2, is crucial in my belief, and also that of these researchers writing these papers, that you'll be able to decrease the risk of infection in the first place, which is phenomenally important. So just, this is my own interpretation of literature regarding NRF2 and the COVID virus. I'm not trying to diagnose or treat or cure anybody with this particular information, and this is not necessarily the opinion of the LifeVantage Corporation. So that's my official disclaimer. But there it is right there. It's a coronavirus. Coronaviruses are not rare. They've been around for forever. Giving us colds and flus, but this one is particularly virulent and particularly aggressive when it comes to spread. The important thing on this are these little receptors here, and we'll explain how they become important in infection. So the virus itself is able to infect us when we inhale. It has the ability to be attracted to what are called ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 transport protein, which are on the epithelial cells or surface cells in the lungs. And that's where it gets in here. So you inhale this virus, it gets into the cells, it drops the pH of the cells, makes your cell more acidic. And to make cells more acidic, you have to increase hydrogen, which are free radicals. So you're increasing the free radical attack on the cell, which then changes the environment of your cell, so the virus can replicate itself and make more copies. That's how that particularly works. Then you have the acute inflammatory stage. Cytokines are released, particularly what's called bradykinin, which is also a chemical that your body releases, asthmatics have, and that's why they have difficulty breathing. So there's this entire cascade storm, cytokine storm of bradykinins, which irritates and congests the lungs and ultimately can cause death because you can't breathe. So that's the phase 3, the severe disease or resolution. And then here in this phase, which is late in the game, the body on its own will increase NRF2. So when this information came out, of course, we're thinking, we know something that increases NRF2 before we get to this stage here, before the virus infects. And why is this important? Because if we can keep our NRF2 level, that protein level, high enough, and make the enzymes, the ones that were in the video as far as the 3 antioxidant enzymes, and in particular, also increasing glutathione levels in the cell, as you'll see in a few minutes, it's extremely important in keeping the cells healthy.
Dr. Hugh, if you could just break down before everybody, just break down what NRF2 is to explain the pathway and so forth for everybody.
Right, we got it right here. So NRF2 is a protein in your cell that when it's activated, or when we knock off this KEAP2 protein, it gets inside the cell and inside the nucleus, I should say, and activates genes. It activates at least 4,500 different genes in the human cell. You got about 23,000 genes. So it's the biggest player ever discovered with respect to gene activation. That's something I was studying back in my undergraduate and grad school days, the University of Toronto. I actually have a couple of papers on PubMed co-author regarding gene activation. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And the ability of NRF2 to activate, that's why it's so important. That's why the doctor on the West Coast was talking about one of the most important discoveries ever, because it affects so many genes. So what do we know? increases this ability for this NRF2 to get inside the cell. Viral infections, obviously the COVID will do that. Oxidative stress will do that as well. But we can take natural products or a combination of natural products, which we find in Protandim, which automatically and extremely effectively allow NRF2 to enter the cell. That's a key component of what we're talking about here. We're not waiting until the viral infection has attacked the body so much that it's a last ditch attempt to save itself. We're talking about using it early on in order to increase the NRF2 levels and therefore increase expression of these good enzymes and also of glutathione. So here's a very important paper. This is back, I think, in May, maybe even earlier, and he was talking about endogenous deficiency in glutathione. So that's your own cell's deficiency in glutathione. And glutathione is part of that antioxidant band that is probably playing the loudest in our cells. And his opinion is that it's the most likely cause of serious manifestations and death in COVID patients. So low glutathione is bad. You remember from the video, as we age, the antioxidant enzymes drop down, glutathione drops down. That's why in COVID, you have a very, very high death rate in patients 85 and greater. And in children, they may harbor the virus in their sinuses, but by and large, they do not get sick. You're not having a 25% death rate in kids, thank God, because their glutathione levels or antioxidant enzyme levels are very, very high. The same reason children don't get rheumatoid arthritis or dementia, their ability to stave off these issues because their ability to repair their cells with the enzymes and glutathione is at its highest point. So our ability now to add a supplement that will make our cells behave more in a younger fashion is key, in my opinion, to improving our chances with this particular virus. So at age 65, glutathione levels go down. They're lower in men, as we see over here. Cigarette smoking is bad. Chronic diseases also increase or decrease glutathione levels. You hear about COVID and comorbidities. What are comorbidities? That's obesity, people that smoke, people with diabetes. All those groups have significantly lower glutathione levels and a glutathione deficiency in their cells already. So they're at much, much greater risk of having that bradykinin, that cytokine storm, and having their lungs basically fill up and suffocate because they are not able to stop the free radicals from causing all that damage. The other thing too is initially, in my opinion, why children can't even get infected with this, or people with good glutathione levels, is I mentioned before how the cell is infected by the virus and the virus goes in there and it drops the pH. Well, if you have something that can absorb those hydrogen ions to keep the free radical storm from the hydrogen ions from occurring in the first place, namely glutathione right here, then the ability for the cell to even allow the virus to replicate or make copies of itself is just in there. The cell's not going to allow that. Then other cells can identify that your epithelial cells is infected and come along and destroy it, and boom, the virus is taken care of. So that's a really key point that researchers are now talking about more, and the studies are going to be done. And I know there are going to be a plethora of studies regarding how important just giving glutathione is. So here's the other point when it comes to NRF2. If you have high levels of this NRF2 protein, the SARS virus is out here, it attaches onto that ACE2 receptor we talked about and gets transported in the cell. Well, as it turns out, NRF2 downregulates the expression of this receptor. That's rather convenient because we have less receptors. The ability for the cell to become infected in the first place is decreased. In a few minutes, I'll talk about the three strategies with respect to NRF2 and cell infection, but this is the first one, not allowing the cell to get infected in the first place. And increasing NRF2 seems to be very, very good at decreasing and dampening down the expression of these ACE2 receptors. I hope that's pretty clear, and that's a very, very important point. There are other factors involved, obviously. This is a mess, but this is how complicated it gets. So there are plenty of points here where you can look at NRF2 stopping the receptor, interacting with certain other proteins, keeping the replication from occurring by increasing different antioxidant enzymes. But all of these pathways have to do with or are under the influence of NRF2. And that's extremely important. And it's extremely lucky for us because we have a very, very safe and effective and powerful way of increasing our NRF2. So number one is to decrease the ability of the cells to get infected in the first place. We talked about that. And I can't see my own slide here. I'll move this down here a little bit. The NRF2 reduces the receptor expression in the lung cells. That's important. Therefore, NRF2 will enhance this antiviral state, which is extremely important. In conclusion, the literature here attempts that dimethyl fumarate, all right, is able to inhibit the entry of the virus inside our lung cells. Dimethyl fumarate is also called Tecfidera, I believe. And I'm going to jump to a different slide here. Let me do this, move this over here. And then just want to show you, because there was a study done a while ago looking at this FDA drug for MS called dimethyl fumarate or Tecfidera. Was studied a few years ago, and it was compared as far as what chemicals, either natural chemicals like sulforaphane. Okay, sulforaphane is basically the chemical you get out of broccoli. It stimulates NRF2 activity a little bit. Bardoxyl and methyl, that ended up not being a very good chemical because of other side effects, but here's the dimethyl fumarate. All right, and then here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Protandim, which has the highest activation level. It's 40% higher than what I think from literature is the next best thing, which is the dimethyl fumarate. So they're talking about using dimethyl fumarate to mitigate COVID infections, which I think is it's sound science to be sure. But how about we use something that is significantly more effective than dimethyl fumarate, and that is namely Protandim at increasing those NRF2 levels. This is very important to remember that they're talking about, using, continue current slide, talking about using this particular drug, all right, to mitigate the infection. Should be recommended in clinical trials. Well, there's something that's much better, and we know that, and that's the Protandim. So step one or strategy one, keep the virus from getting in our cells. NRF2 activation does that. Protandim is the best NRF2 activator ever studied, and that's a good thing. Number two is reducing the ability of the virus to change the environment. Remember, we talked about that little bugger gets in there, it drops the pH, that makes it a nice environment for it to grow. How do we stop that? Well, if we have the ability to activate NRF2 in the cells, which result in more glutathione right here, all right, this is extremely important in keeping the pH of your cells normal. If the cells can't become more acidic, virus can't grow, your body can then knock off those cells that have been infected. And that's particularly important. And that was also the paper we talked about initially with respect to low glutathione levels as being one of the most important indicators of morbidity and mortality for COVID infections. So having good glutathione levels is extremely important. And what do we know about Protandim? It increases glutathione levels by 300% in 4 months. That is better than a glutathione IV. That's better than taking any other glutathione enhancer, N-acetylcysteine, alpha-lipoic acid, Tecfidera. All those things are not able to increase your glutathione levels as well as Protandim. So number two, obviously we want to make sure that is, if the virus does make its way in, we don't let it make copies of itself. And here, NRF2 agonists, which means NRF2 chemicals like Protandim that increase the NRF2 level, broadly effective in limiting virus replication, making copies of itself there and suppressing the pro-inflammatory response in humans. This study was, and I'll make these all available for everyone on an email, have this all in one email. And again, glutathione deficiency appears to be a crucial factor in the lung damage and results in serious manifestations. So glutathione levels are very, very important. Number three is, let's say the virus does get in. Let's say it does make copies of itself. How do we then mitigate or reduce that cytokine storm that is going to cause the lung problems, and the people that were initially put on ventilators and all the mayhem and all the death was caused by the ability for that thing to actually, the virus to actually it did get in, did replicate, and then the subsequent inflammation problems. So potential anti-inflammatory therapy based on targeting transcription of NRF2. All right. And there is envisioning a threefold attack here by increasing the fitness and protection of the cells, promoting anti-inflammatory activation, and the uncontrolled production of the cytokines. So once the cell is infected, increasing NRF2 in these three different ways here helps to mitigate, helps to reduce that cytokine storm and that deadly inflammatory effect that this virus causes. Here again, another paper talking about the same thing, proposed an anti-inflammatory strategy based on, this is NRF2, that can be deployed against the virus. It provides robust protection, restoring redox, or this is antioxidant levels, protein homeostasis, normal protein levels, and promoting resolution of inflammation and facilitating cell repair. All those things are important. If it does get in, we haven't been able to block it, we haven't been able to stop it from making copies of itself, then it goes on an infection spree inside our cells. If we do this as well, then it'll make a difference. So what that tells us, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can, if you increase NRF2 levels at each stage of the game, prior to infection, it'll reduce that. If the cell gets infected, glutathione levels are high, it's going to keep it from spreading. If it has spread, someone's glutathione levels are low, I should say, it keeps them from getting a massive infection. So it's not just prevention, but also can help with reducing the amount of inflammation, and I think ultimately the morbidity and mortality of this virus. Attempting to propose that NRF2 interacting foods and nutrients can rebalance insulin significantly for patients that have diabetes, for example. So that's another pathway. If we take care of the diabetes issue, that comorbidity in these patients, it's also going to decrease the amount of inflammatory response too. I want to make 2 points here. The federal government, because of their drive to come up with a vaccine, which we're not going to talk about here tonight, but because their drive to come up with a vaccine really has spent no time looking at other ways to treat, prevent, and cure this particular disease. The reason for that is if you have a treatment for a disease, you cannot develop a vaccine for it. They don't allow that. So if you've got the ability to stop this early on, neither the NIH, the FDA, or the CDC set up any committees or looked at repurposing any drugs or natural products for that matter in order to help with this pandemic. Other countries have. A lot of this information on, as you'll see on NRF2 is coming from other countries and the United States. One of the reasons why our numbers are so bad is that our diets are not the same as they are in India and in the Far East, because we don't have these many of these foods that over a lifetime will help with NRF2 activation. We do have Protandim, which is a synthesis of all the best things studied in order to increase your NRF2 levels. So we have something at our fingertips that can do this. And to me, it's really frustrating that, the federal government hasn't even lifted a finger to find out what we can do besides, rushing headlong towards the vaccine. And that goes for probably one of the most promising drug treatments for seriously infected people. That's ivermectin. And you'll probably hear about more about that in the news here shortly. So this is one of the best papers that summarizes how NRF2 can treat the infective capability of this virus and also modulate the infection. All right, immediate suppression by NRF2. I had other parts I was going to talk about here, but I just want to leave it at novel prevention, diagnostic treatment of COVID with by activating NRF2. So quite simply, the theme of tonight is NRF2 is crucially important in keeping our cells healthy at every step of a potential infection, from initial prevention to cell replication to massive inflammatory response in the body. And anywhere along that path, we can mitigate and decrease or even prevent, in my opinion, the ability of the virus to get in. Is it 100% for 100% of the people? Of course not. Nothing is. But it'd be wonderful to see at least from our own numbers with LifeVantage, how people are faring that have been taken on a regular basis for a number of years, and how they're doing. Because I think if that is actually looked at, we're going to have a significantly less infection rate than other groups that are not taking Protandim. That's just my personal opinion, but I'd love to see that information, because I think it's self-evident that if your NRF2 levels are high enough, this is not an easy virus to cause problems in those types of potential patients. I think that's pretty much a summation of what I wanted to say this evening. I hope I didn't bore everybody to tears, but this is an important product, and I'm so glad that my dad up in Canada has been taking this for a long period of time, that I have hundreds, if not thousands, of patients that have been taking this in Florida, because I think we're very, very blessed to have had this for a number of years. And without any idea that this pandemic was coming, we're in a position to make sure that our patients, well, in my case, and my patients are better suited to fend this off. And if they get infected, will have a milder infection. I firmly believe that's the case.